I was 23 years old when I knocked on the door of the Anderson mansion for the first time. My nursing uniform was pressed, my bag was full of medical supplies, and my heart was full of hope. I had no idea that walking through that door would lead to the most humiliating moment of my life. But I also had no idea that 15 years later, I would walk through a different door, wearing a director's badge, and face the same people who destroyed me that day. The agency sent me to care for Mrs. Margaret Anderson, an elderly woman recovering from a stroke. The house was enormous, one of those old estates with marble floors and paintings that probably cost more than my entire education. When the housekeeper opened the door, she looked at me from head to toe with this expression, like she was inspecting something unpleasant. She didn't smile. She didn't welcome me. She just stepped aside and said, "You're the nurse. Follow me." That should have been my first warning, but I needed the job. I had student loans crushing me, and private nursing paid 3 times what the hospital offered. Mrs. Anderson was in a bedroom on the 2nd floor. She was a small woman, fragile, her left side partially paralyzed from the stroke. When I walked in, she looked at me with these cloudy blue eyes, and for a moment, I saw fear there. Not fear of me, but fear of what had happened to her body. Fear of being dependent. I understood that fear. I had seen it in so many patients. I sat down beside her bed and took her hand gently. "My name is Rebecca," I said softly. "I'm here to help you get better. We're going to take this one day at a time, okay?" She didn't speak much because the stroke had affected her speech, but she squeezed my hand. That squeeze told me everything I needed to know. She was scared, but she was willing to try. The first week went well. I helped Mrs. Anderson with her physical therapy exercises, monitored her medication, helped her eat, helped her bathe. It was intimate work, the kind that requires patience and gentleness. She started to improve, small things at first. She could lift her left arm a little higher. She could say a few more words. I celebrated every tiny victory with her, because I knew how hard she was fighting. But her family, they were a different story. Her son, Richard Anderson, was a cardiac surgeon, successful, respected, the kind of doctor who gets written about in medical journals. He would come into the room during my shifts, and he would watch me like a hawk, not in a supportive way, but in this suspicious, critical way. He would question everything I did. "Why are you doing the exercises that way? Is that the correct dosage? Shouldn't she be improving faster?" I would explain my methods calmly, professionally. I showed him the care plan approved by her physician. I showed him the progress notes, but nothing satisfied him. He looked at me like I was incompetent, like I was just some girl playing nurse. His wife, Catherine, was worse. She was one of those women who had never worked a day in her life, but acted like she understood everything. She would come in wearing her expensive clothes and jewelry, and she would criticize everything. The way I positioned the pillows, the way I helped Mrs. Anderson drink water, the temperature of the room. "This room smells like a hospital," she complained one day. "Can't you do something about it?" I wanted to tell her that her mother-in-law was recovering from a stroke, that medical care sometimes involved medical smells, but I bit my tongue. I needed this job. Their daughter, Victoria, was in her early 20s, around my age. She barely acknowledged my existence. She would walk into the room talking on her phone, completely ignoring her grandmother. She treated me like furniture, like I was just part of the background. One time she snapped her fingers at me. Actually snapped her fingers like I was a dog. "You," she said, not even bothering to learn my name. "Bring me some water." I wasn't there to serve her. I was there to care for her grandmother. But I got her the water because I didn't want to cause problems. The second week, everything fell apart. Mrs. Anderson developed a urinary tract infection. It happens sometimes with elderly patients, especially those who are bedridden. It's common, it's treatable, but it needs to be caught early. I noticed the symptoms immediately: fever, confusion, discomfort. I documented everything and called her physician right away. He prescribed antibiotics, and I started the treatment. Within 2 days, she was already improving. The infection was clearing up. This was textbook nursing care. I did everything right, but Richard didn't see it that way. He stormed into the room one morning, his face red with rage. "My mother has an infection," he shouted. "How did you let this happen?" I stayed calm. I explained that UTIs are common complications in elderly stroke patients. I showed him the research, the statistics. I explained that I had caught it early and started treatment immediately. I told him that his mother was already responding well to the antibiotics, but he didn't want to hear any of it. "You're incompetent," he said, his voice cold and cutting. "You let my mother get sick under your care." Catherine appeared in the doorway. "I knew we shouldn't have hired someone so young," she said to Richard, like I wasn't even standing there. "She clearly doesn't know what she's doing. Mother is suffering because of her negligence." Negligence. That word hit me like a punch. I had done nothing wrong. I had provided excellent care. Mrs. Anderson was improving, but they had already made up their minds about me. Victoria was there too, leaning against the doorframe with her arms crossed. "She probably gave grandmother the infection," she said casually, like she was commenting on the weather. "I read online that nurses can carry bacteria. That wasn't even medically accurate, but nobody corrected her." Richard nodded, like she had said something profound. I tried to defend myself. I explained the situation again, more firmly this time. I told them that I had followed every protocol, that their mother was receiving excellent care, that the infection was being treated successfully. But Richard cut me off. "I don't want to hear your excuses," he said. "I want you out of this house. Now." My heart dropped. "Mr. Anderson, please," I said. "Your mother needs continuous care. The antibiotics need to be administered on schedule. Her physical therapy can't be interrupted. If you dismiss me now, it could set back her recovery." He stepped closer to me, and there was something mean in his eyes. "My mother needs a competent nurse," he said, "not someone who lets her get infected. Pack your things and leave. We'll find someone else." I looked at Mrs. Anderson. She was watching us from her bed, her eyes wide with distress. She tried to speak, tried to say something, but the words wouldn't come out right. She reached her good hand toward me, and I could see she didn't want me to go, but her son didn't even look at her. "Now," he repeated. I went to gather my things from the small room where I kept my supplies. My hands were shaking. I could hear them in the other room, talking about me like I was trash. "Can you believe the agency sent us someone so inexperienced?" Catherine said. "She could have killed Mother." "We should report her," Victoria added. "She shouldn't be allowed to work as a nurse." Richard agreed. "I'll make sure the agency knows about her incompetence. And I'll spread the word at the hospital. She won't work in this city again if I have anything to say about it." Those words terrified me. Richard was influential. If he blacklisted me, I could lose everything. All my years of study, all my hard work, all my dreams of helping people, gone because one powerful family decided I was incompetent for something that wasn't my fault. I finished packing my bag. My eyes burning with tears I refused to let fall. When I walked back through the bedroom, Mrs. Anderson grabbed my hand. She held it tight and tried to speak. "Sorry," she managed to whisper. "Thank you." I squeezed her hand back. "You're going to be okay," I told her. "Keep fighting." The housekeeper practically escorted me out like I was a criminal. As I walked down that long driveway, carrying my bag and my humiliation, I heard the door slam behind me. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before I could even start the engine. I cried then, not just because I lost the job, but because I had done everything right, and it didn't matter. They had the power, the money, the reputation. I had nothing. I was just a young nurse with student debt and no connections. I called the agency as soon as I got home. I explained what happened, hoping they would understand, but Richard had already called them. He told them I was negligent, that I had endangered his mother's life. The agency was apologetic, but firm. They couldn't send me on any more assignments until the complaint was investigated. That investigation took 3 months. 3 months of no work, no income, watching my savings disappear while I waited for someone to decide if my career was over before it even started. Eventually, the investigation cleared me. The physician who treated Mrs. Anderson wrote a statement supporting my care. The medical records showed I had done everything correctly, but the damage was done. The agency was nervous about placing me after such a high-profile complaint, and Richard had kept his promise. He had talked to people at the hospital where I had hoped to work. Suddenly, positions I had been considered for were no longer available. Interviews were canceled. Nobody said it outright, but I knew. He had poisoned the well. I had to leave the city. There was no choice. I moved across the country to a small town in Oregon where nobody knew the Anderson name, where I could start over. I got a job at a rural hospital. The pay was lower, the work was harder, but I threw myself into it. I worked double shifts. I took every opportunity to learn, to improve, to prove that I was good at what I did. I wasn't going to let them destroy me. I was going to become better than they ever imagined. Years passed. 5 years. 10 years. 15 years. I moved from bedside nursing to management. I got my master's degree in healthcare administration. I specialized in patient care quality and hospital operations. I became assistant director at a regional hospital, then director of nursing at a larger facility. I built a reputation for turning struggling departments around, for improving patient outcomes, for creating environments where nurses felt valued and supported. I published research papers. I spoke at conferences. I became exactly what Richard Anderson had tried to prevent me from being: successful, respected, influential. And then I got the offer. Eastside Medical Center, one of the most prestigious hospitals in the country, was looking for a new chief nursing officer. The position would make me responsible for overseeing all nursing operations, quality improvement, and patient care standards. It was in the same city I had left 15 years ago, the same city where the Andersons had humiliated me. Part of me wanted to refuse. Why go back to a place that held such painful memories? But another part of me, the part that had spent 15 years fighting to get here, wanted to face it. I accepted the position. Walking into Eastside Medical Center on my first day as CNO felt surreal. The building was massive, modern, state-of-the-art. My office was on the executive floor. I had a team of nurse managers reporting to me. I had a voice in hospital policy. Everything I had worked for was real. During my first week, I focused on learning the systems, meeting the staff, understanding the challenges. I reviewed quality metrics, patient satisfaction scores, incident reports. I noticed that the cardiac unit had some concerning patterns. Higher than average complication rates, patient complaints about communication, tension between nurses and physicians. I scheduled a meeting with the cardiac surgery department to discuss these issues. When I walked into that conference room, I saw him, Dr. Richard Anderson. Older now, gray at the temples, lines around his eyes, but unmistakably him. He was the head of cardiac surgery. He was sitting at the head of the table, looking important and authoritative. When I entered, he glanced up at me with mild interest, then looked back down at his papers. He didn't recognize me. Why would he? To him, I had been nobody, just some young nurse he dismissed 15 years ago. But I recognized him instantly, and everything from that day came flooding back. I didn't say anything. I introduced myself professionally to the group. Good morning. I'm Rebecca Chen, the new chief nursing officer. I'm here to discuss some quality concerns in the cardiac unit. Richard looked up again, this time paying more attention. I saw him studying my face, like something was nagging at him, like maybe I looked familiar but he couldn't place me. I continued with the meeting, presenting the data, discussing the issues. Some of the nurses in the room looked relieved that someone was finally addressing these problems. Some of the surgeons looked defensive. Richard spoke up. I think you'll find that cardiac surgery is complex, he said, in that same condescending tone I remembered. Complications are inevitable. The nursing staff needs better training to understand what we're doing. One of the nurses, a woman named Sarah who had been working in cardiac for 10 years, looked like she wanted to say something but held back. I could see the frustration in her face. Dr. Anderson, I said calmly. The data suggests that communication breakdown between surgical staff and nursing staff is contributing to these complications. I'd like to implement a structured handoff protocol and daily interdisciplinary rounds. He frowned. We don't have time for more meetings, he said dismissively. We're surgeons. We need to be in the OR, not sitting around talking. I smiled politely. Patient safety requires communication, I said. The research is clear on this. We'll start a pilot program next month. I'll be personally observing the cardiac unit to assess the workflow. I saw something flash in his eyes. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by nursing leadership. Over the next few weeks, I spent time in the cardiac unit. I watched the interactions between doctors and nurses. I saw what Sarah and her team were dealing with. Richard and some of his colleagues treated the nurses like servants. They gave orders without explanation. They ignored nursing concerns about patients. They blamed nurses when things went wrong, but took all the credit when things went right. It was a toxic environment, and it was affecting patient care. I documented everything. I collected statements from nurses who felt unsafe speaking up. I reviewed patient outcomes and found clear correlations between poor communication and complications. I built an airtight case. Then I presented it to the hospital CEO and the board of directors. I recommended mandatory communication training for the cardiac surgery team, implementation of structured handoff protocols, and consequences for physicians who violated professional conduct policies. The board approved everything. Richard was furious. He came to my office, storming in without an appointment. "You're undermining my department," he accused. "My surgeons are the best in the region. We don't need some administrator telling us how to do our jobs." I looked at him calmly from behind my desk. "Dr. Anderson," I said, "I'm not undermining anyone. I'm improving patient safety. The data supports these changes. The board supports these changes. You can either participate constructively or resist, but the changes are happening either way." He leaned forward, his hands on my desk. "Do you know who I am?" he said. "I've been at this hospital for 20 years. I bring in millions of dollars in revenue. The administration listens to me." I stood up, meeting his eyes. "I know exactly who you are, Dr. Anderson," I said quietly. "And the administration listened to me. That should tell you something." There was something in my voice, something in the way I said his name, that made him pause. He stared at me, really looked at me this time. I could see his mind working, trying to remember. "Have we met before?" he asked. I could have lied. I could have said no and moved on, but I decided I was done protecting his ego. "Yes," I said. 15 years ago. You hired me to care for your mother after her stroke. You fired me after she developed a UTI, blamed me for negligence, threatened to destroy my career. You told the agency I was incompetent. You blacklisted me at hospitals in this city. You forced me to leave and start over somewhere else." I watched the recognition dawn on his face. His expression went from confusion to shock to something that might have been embarrassment. "That was you?" he said. "The young nurse?" I nodded. "Rebecca Chen. Same person. Just 15 years older and your boss now." He stepped back from my desk. That situation was," he started, but I held up my hand. "You don't need to explain," I said. "I understand what happened. Your mother had a common complication. I provided appropriate care, but you needed someone to blame because you couldn't control what was happening to her. You had the power to make me the scapegoat, so you did. You didn't care what it did to my life. You didn't care that you almost destroyed my career before it started. You just cared about feeling like you were in control." He was silent. I continued, "I'm not here for revenge, Dr. Anderson. I'm here to do my job. But my job includes making sure that nurses in this hospital are treated with respect and that patient care comes before ego. So these changes are happening. You can choose to be part of the solution." He left my office without another word. Over the next few months, I implemented all the changes I had proposed. Some physicians resisted at first, but most came around when they saw that the protocols actually made their jobs easier and improved outcomes. The cardiac unit's complication rates dropped. Patient satisfaction scores improved. The nurses felt safer speaking up about concerns. It was working. Richard kept his distance from me. Our interactions were purely professional, always in group settings. But I noticed he was changing. He was more careful about how he spoke to nurses. He participated in the handoff protocols. He attended the communication training without complaint. I heard from Sarah that he had actually apologized to her team for his past behavior. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. Then one afternoon, my assistant told me that Dr. Anderson wanted to see me. He was in my waiting area. I told her to send him in. He entered my office looking uncomfortable. "Thank you for seeing me," he said formally. "I know you're busy." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat down and was quiet for a moment, like he was trying to find the words. "I owe you an apology," he finally said. "Not just for how I've acted since you arrived, but for what I did to you 15 years ago. I was wrong. My mother's infection wasn't your fault. You did everything right. I know that now. I knew it then, if I'm honest. But I was terrified. I had just watched my mother have a stroke, watched her lose her ability to speak and move, watched her become dependent. I felt helpless. And when she got that infection, I needed someone to blame. You were young, you were there, and I had the power to make you the problem instead of facing my own fear. That was cruel and unfair." I listened without interrupting. He continued, "I had no right to try to destroy your career. I had no right to blacklist you. I used my influence as a weapon because I could, not because I should. I've thought about that day many times over the years. I've wondered what happened to you, if you were okay, if you continued nursing. I told myself that you probably moved on, found another job, that it wasn't that big of a deal. But I was lying to myself. I knew what I did. I knew I hurt you. He looked at me directly. I'm sorry, Rebecca. Truly sorry. Not because you're my boss now, but because what I did was wrong. You deserved better. My mother knew it too. She was upset with me for firing you. She told me I was wrong, but I wouldn't listen. I took a breath. Part of me wanted to hold on to the anger, to make him feel what I felt that day. But another part of me recognized that holding on to that pain was only hurting me. Your apology matters, I said. Thank you for giving it. What you did hurt me deeply. It changed the course of my life. But in some ways, it also made me stronger. I had to prove myself over and over again. I had to work harder than everyone else. I had to become undeniable. And I did. So while I don't thank you for the pain you caused, I acknowledge that it shaped who I became. He nodded. You've accomplished remarkable things, he said. The changes you've made in this hospital, they're already showing results. You're good at this. Better than good. You're exactly what this hospital needs. There was a pause, and then he asked, How is your mother? Is she still alive? A sad smile crossed his face. She passed away 5 years ago, another stroke. But she lived for 10 years after you cared for her. 10 good years. She talked about you sometimes. She said you were kind to her, that you treated her like a person, not just a patient. She regretted that we fired you. She never forgave me for it, actually. Said it was one of the worst things I'd ever done. Hearing that Mrs. Anderson remembered me with kindness brought unexpected emotion. I'm sorry for your loss, I said. She was a good patient. She worked hard at her recovery. Richard stood up. I won't take more of your time, he said. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I respect what you're doing here. If there's anything I can do to support the nursing staff, please let me know. After he left, I sat in my office for a long time, processing the conversation. The next few months were transformative for the hospital. The culture began to shift. More physicians started treating nurses as partners in patient care rather than subordinates. Communication improved across departments. Our quality metrics climbed. Patient satisfaction scores reached the highest levels in the hospital's history. We were becoming a model for other institutions. I was invited to speak at national conferences about our success. Other hospitals wanted to learn from our transformation. One day, Richard approached me in the hallway. Rebecca, he said, do you have a moment? We stepped into a quiet conference room. I wanted to tell you something, he said. I've been thinking about retirement. I'm 67 now. I've been a surgeon for over 40 years. And I'm realizing that the last few months, working under the new protocols, treating the nurses with respect, actually communicating, this is how it should have been all along. I wish I had figured this out 30 years ago. I would have been a better doctor, a better person. He paused. I'm going to retire at the end of this year. And before I go, I want to do something. I want to establish a scholarship fund for nursing students. In my mother's name and in your honor. For students who face obstacles, who come from difficult circumstances, who need a second chance. Because you should have never needed to start over. You should have been supported and encouraged from the beginning. I can't change the past, but maybe I can help change someone else's future. I was moved by this gesture. That's very generous, Richard, I said. It will make a real difference. He smiled, a genuine smile. It's the least I can do, he said. And Rebecca, for what it's worth, you were right about everything. The protocols, the communication training, the culture change. You were right, and I was wrong. This hospital is better because of you. We shook hands, and as he walked away, I realized something had shifted. The anger I had carried for 15 years, the humiliation, the hurt, it had transformed into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of peace. I had proven myself not by seeking revenge, but by being excellent at what I did. I had changed a broken system. I had protected nurses from being treated the way I was treated. I had made sure that patients received better care. That was worth more than any personal vendetta. Richard retired 6 months later. The hospital held a ceremony honoring his 42 years of service. He gave a speech where he talked about the importance of humility in medicine, about learning from mistakes, about treating every member of the healthcare team with respect. He announced the scholarship fund and publicly acknowledged the positive changes in hospital culture. When he finished, he looked directly at me and said, "To the nurses who make excellent patient care possible, thank you. And to the leaders who fight for you, thank you. You make us all better." The nursing staff gave him a standing ovation, not because he had always been perfect, but because he had been willing to change. After the ceremony, several nurses approached me. Sarah was among them. "When you first arrived," she said, "and I heard you were implementing all these changes, I didn't think it would work. I've seen directors try before. The doctors always win. But you didn't back down. You didn't let them intimidate you. You actually changed things. You made this a place where I'm proud to work again." Other nurses nodded in agreement. One of them, a young nurse fresh out of school, said, "You give me hope that my voice matters, that I can speak up for patients without being punished." That moment meant more to me than any title or salary or recognition, because that's why I became a nurse in the first place, to help people, to advocate for those who couldn't advocate for themselves, to make the healthcare system a little more just, a little more compassionate. Years have passed since then. I'm still at Eastside Medical Center. We've continued to improve and innovate. We've become a teaching hospital, known for our commitment to nursing excellence and interdisciplinary collaboration. The scholarship fund Richard established has helped dozens of nursing students complete their education. Some of them now work at our hospital, carrying forward the culture we've built. I think about that young woman I was, standing in the Anderson driveway with tears in her eyes, believing her career was over. I think about how powerless I felt, how small. And I think about how far I've traveled from that moment, not just professionally, but personally. I learned that the people who try to break you often reveal more about themselves than about you. I learned that humiliation can be transformed into determination. I learned that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming so undeniably good at what you do that no one can take it away from you. Richard and I never became friends, but we developed a mutual respect before he retired. He sends me a card every year on Nurses Day with a simple message: "Thank you for making healthcare better." It's a small gesture, but it acknowledges the journey we both took, the harm he caused, and the change that eventually happened. The story doesn't end with a perfect resolution, because real life isn't that neat. Some scars remain. I still feel a flash of anger sometimes when I encounter arrogant physicians who dismiss nursing concerns. I still advocate fiercely for young nurses who face injustice. I still carry the memory of that day, but I also carry the knowledge that I survived it, that I thrived despite it, that I turned pain into purpose. And maybe that's the real power in these stories of pain and power. Not that the pain disappears, but that we choose what we do with it. We can let it destroy us, or we can use it to build something better. We can stay victims, or we can become advocates. We can nurse our wounds, or we can heal others. I chose to heal others, and in doing so, I healed myself. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever felt dismissed, humiliated, or powerless, I want you to know something. You are not defined by the worst thing someone said about you or did to you. You are defined by how you respond, by what you build from the rubble, by the person you choose to become. Don't let anyone write your story for you. Don't let their limitations become your ceiling. Don't let their cruelty become your identity. Keep fighting. Keep growing. Keep proving, not to them, but to yourself, that you are capable of extraordinary things. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more stories about turning pain into power. Leave a comment telling me about a time you overcame injustice. And watch the next video, where I share another story about finding strength in the darkest moments. Because these stories matter. Your story matters. And together, we remind each other that we are stronger than anyone who tried to break us.